Welcome to StAugustine.com. I'm Damian Hopkins.
And I'm Phillip Heilman.
And now we'll be taking you through our Sweet 16 picks. Let's start in the South region. Florida versus Pittsburgh.
As I said in the first video, Florida's probably the deepest team in the country. They've been to 3 straight Elite Eights, and we can't imagine them not at least getting there. Pittsburgh's a tough team, but I think they move on. Jacksonville native Patrick Young's leading the Gators.
VCU, UCLA.
Like I said in the first video as well, UCLA's probably got the best player in this game. They're coming in hot after beating Arizona in the Pac-12 tournament. To get the automatic bid, they're going to move on to the Sweet 16.
Ohio State, Syracuse. Wow.
This is a matchup of 2 teams who literally can't score. The final score might be 48-46. It really is going to be who can get to 50 points first. We have Syracuse getting there. CJ Leslie is one of the only offensive weapons on the floor, so he's going to lead them to the Sweet 16.
New Mexico, Kansas.
I would love to see Joel Embiid back for this game. He's got a stress fracture in his back. He could be the #1 overall pick, so nobody's rushing him back. Nice pun there. But Kansas is still going to win this game. Andrew Wiggins is really, really good. Bill Self is probably one of the top 3 or 4 coaches in the league. New Mexico's solid. They've only lost 6 games all year, but I can't imagine Kansas going down.
Virginia, Memphis.
Somebody I didn't mention the first time we went over Virginia was Joe Harris. He's a 6'6" senior guard. He leads them in pretty much everything. He's really solid. He's going to be a tough matchup for Memphis, who doesn't have a lot of big perimeter guys. Nobody's going to be able to match up with him. He shoots a 3-ball really well, and he's going to shoot him into the Sweet 16.
Cincinnati, Michigan State.
Tom Izzo's bunch has made 5 Sweet 16s in the last 6 years. They're going to make it 6 of the next 7. They're going to move on.
North Carolina, Iowa State.
Old Roy Williams ain't going to be happy after this one. Iowa State's moving on.
UConn, Villanova, old Big East matchup.
Yeah, this is really interesting to see these 2 teams, longtime rivals, matching up in the round of 32. We've got Villanova moving on, and I feel pretty good about that. UConn, outside of Shabazz Napier, they struggle to score. He's by far the best player. If they can limit him, I think Nova will be fine. So that's half our bracket. We're going to move on to the West and Midwest regions, starting with Arizona versus Oklahoma State.
Unfortunately, for as great as Marcus Smart is, even he can't win 1-on-5. You saw this in the NBA a couple years ago when Derrick Rose tried to beat the Heat all by himself, and now he's all hurt and broke down. Arizona advances in that game.
North Dakota State, San Diego State.
Again, San Diego State has a top 5 defense. North Dakota State, their Cinderella run unfortunately comes to an end. San Diego State's got Steve Fisher. Fisher is a great coach. SDSU advances.
Baylor versus the Fighting Doug McDermotts.
Unfortunately, my colleague just said it. When you've got Doug McDermott, who leads a team in both points and rebounds, and probably assists as well, I have to look it up. When you're Doug McDermott versus Baylor, that's not going to go well for you. The game's in Texas. It's not that far away from Baylor. I see the Bears beating the McDermotts.
Tough end to Doug McDermott's career. He's one of only, I think, 8 players in history that scored 3,000 points in a college career.
Now I believe he's 7th on the all-time scoring list, but he won't be doing much scoring in this game. It's unfortunate.
Oregon versus Wisconsin.
Right here, you'd be tempted to pick Wisconsin, but Bo Ryan has as many Final Four appearances as Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, your mom, and your grandmother.
How about me?
And you.
Yes, okay.
And the cameraman as well. All of us combined, that's how many Final Four appearances Bo Ryan has. I don't know what it is, but he chokes in the big moments. He is the Peyton Manning of college basketball coaches. We have Oregon advancing in that game.
And one thing here is Oregon can score the ball probably just as well as anybody in the country, and Wisconsin just perennially struggles to score. That'll be really interesting to see if Wisconsin can keep up with them. We say no. Moving on to the Midwest, Wichita State versus Kansas State.
We have Wichita State in this game. They certainly are the more complete team. for as great a coaching job as I think Bruce Weber has done, this year coming over from Illinois, you just don't, when you don't have the firepower to match up, you just don't have the firepower to match up, and Wichita State has 5 guys that can beat you on a given night.
This will be really interesting because not a lot of people are giving Wichita State credit, even though they've gone 34-0. How far do they have to get for people to kind of believe in this 1 seed? I don't know, but they definitely have to at least win this game.
Yeah. We'll talk about their run.
NC State, Louisville.
NC State pulls off the good 12-5 upset and ruins a lot of brackets, but there's just no way they get past Louisville. I mean, Rick Pitino, if he's not the best coach in basketball, he's certainly top 3. And for as many injuries as they've had this year being wrote off, and Louisville's a 4 seed. Let that sink in. The defending national champions won 29 games this year, won their conference tournament, and they're a 4 seed. Split the regular season the regular season championship with Cincinnati, and they're a 4 seed. The Midwest bracket is stacked, and unfortunately NC State ran into Louisville.
Yeah, I think NC State, TJ Warren has enough to get them past St. Louis, but going against Louisville, so many good NBA caliber players in that roster, I don't think he's got enough.
Not at all.
UMass, Duke.
I'm from Chicago, and Duke's best player, Jabari Parker, is from Chicago, and he's from the South Side. I'm from the South Side, so it's like a basketball match made in heaven. Best player on the court, certainly one of the best coaches in the country. Duke wins this game and wins it pretty easily.
And Texas and Michigan, a game you would think is a football game, but I guess playing basketball.
Here's where you'll be hailing to the conquering hero named Nick Stauskas. I mean, I see him dropping 25 on Texas. He's going to shoot them out of the gym. They're not going to have an answer for him. The Fighting Nick Stauskases and the Michigan Wolverines advance in that game. Apologies to Rick Barnes.
Florida's still feeling the sting from Nick Stauskas' performance in last year's Elite Eight when Michigan beat Florida by 20 to knock them out. All right, moving on to Arizona versus San Diego State.
That's another one of those close games. Not a lot of people give Arizona a lot of credit, but they only lost 4 games this year, and they lost to a great UCLA team in the Pac-12 championship game. We have Arizona State advancing in that game.
Well, just Arizona.
Arizona State, look at me.
The only thing that kind of concerns me a little bit about Arizona is since Brandon Ashley broke his leg, they've been a little bit of a different team. But Sean Miller, their coach, is one of the best teams, or best coaches in the NCAA tournament and winning against the spread. And as a degenerate gambler, I love that. So we like Arizona. Baylor, Oregon.
See, Baylor averages 38.7 rebounds a game. Oregon averages 34.3. Those second chance points in a game like that are going to be critical. We see Baylor advancing, and as I mentioned in a previous video, Baylor's in a great position to make a great run in this tournament.
That would have been another exciting football game this year. Baylor versus Oregon, 2 high-powered offenses.
Unfortunately, RG3 won't be playing for the Bears.
Or the Redskins, maybe. Wichita State, Louisville.
Here's where we have Wichita State's run coming to an end because, unfortunately, they're running into a powerhouse team. Wichita State's a great team, and the selection committee did them absolutely no favors putting them in this region with Kansas State, Louisville, Duke, Michigan, Texas. That's horrible. Wichita State's a #1 seed, but unfortunately they don't have the athletes to compete with Louisville who are going to run them off the court, up and down. We have Louisville winning that game.
Let me ask you real quick. If Louisville does beat Wichita State here, do you think people consider Wichita State's season a fraud if they only advance this far?
Unfortunately, I believe people will consider their season a fraud, and it's not for lack of winning games. I mean, they will have won 36 games at that point. Unfortunately, they're going to run into a team that beat 29 other teams in Louisville. It just happens that way sometimes. It's unfortunate.
Louisville's margin of victory is more than 21 points a game this season, which is the most in the country. Wichita State is second in the country. I think it's about 15 or 16 points a game. So it'll be really interesting. 2 teams that are used to winning and winning big. If it's a tight game, we'll see, kind of who prevails there. And the last one, Duke versus Michigan.
I wonder if Chris Webber is going to come back for that game. No, but we actually have Michigan winning that game because we think Michigan has the better athletes. We think Michigan's got more talent. With no disrespect intended to Mike Krzyzewski, we don't think that Jabari Parker can carry Duke alone. And Mitch McGary is the big in Michigan, and he's averaging well over 8 rebounds a game. We don't think Duke has the size to match up with him. We think Michigan advances.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if McGarry comes back. He's been banged up toward the end of the season. There's kind of a question mark. But outside of Parker and Ronnie Hood, Duke's had a lot of questions in their lineup. It's not as deep. They're not as deep as they have been in years past when they've made serious runs. We like Michigan.
And a lot of these games come down to free throw shooting, whereas Michigan is shooting 76% from the free throw line. Duke's only at 72%, and a lot of that's Jabari Parker. So that's our Sweet 16. Now moving back over here to the South, we have, for a berth in the Elite Eight, Florida versus UCLA.
Florida's run doesn't end here. They're going to keep winning. Casey Prather, Scotty Wilbekin, Will Yeget, and Patrick Young, who I mentioned earlier, 4 seniors who are the best senior-laden group in the country. They've been to the last 3 straight Elite Eights. They want to get back there and they want to do more. They're not losing to UCLA. This is a matchup, I think 2 years ago these two teams matched up in an NCAA tournament and Florida won. I think they move on again.
Syracuse, Kansas. That should have been a national championship game.
About a month ago, you might have thought that would have been a national championship game. Syracuse hadn't lost any games and Kansas was, playing really well. Kansas obviously ended up with a 2 seed. Syracuse kind of sputtered down the stretch and ended up as a 3. This is the first game I think Kansas will really need Joel Embiid back. I don't know if he's going to be there, but we think Kansas is going to win either way. This is Wiggins' coming out party. He scored 41 in the Big 12 tournament to really kind of put himself on the map as much as you can be, as for somebody who's on the cover of Sports Illustrated before he'd ever played a college game, but we think he continues on there.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that Syracuse ended the season the way they did.
The one thing I will say about Syracuse is their 2-3 zone is an incredibly tough matchup in a one-game setting. A lot of teams in their conference kind of get used to it throughout the season and over the years, but Kansas and Syracuse, they play very rarely, and that could be a tough matchup because the 2-3 zone is just something that you don't see, and Boeheim, he's employed it for countless number of years to all kinds of success.
Excellent point, excellent point. Virginia, Michigan State, that's a great match.
That is a great matchup. That is just an old-time, gritty, grind-out victory or just game. We think Michigan State, this was one that we kind of went back and forth on. Damian really liked Virginia. I really like Michigan State. I like the way that they're coming on. I like that they have Keith Appling back. I like that they have Gary Harris healthy. They've got just so many horses. I think Virginia's magical season, which it has been, because Virginia hasn't had a season like this since Ralph Sampson was there, just forever ago.
Last ACC championship in 1976.
Right, yeah, that's a long time ago. Virginia had a great year, but I think Tom Izzo, this guy's always in the Final Four. He's going to have Michigan State moving on.
Iowa State, Villanova.
Iowa State won the Big 12 title, playing some of their best basketball this season. Villanova, as I've mentioned before, is very vulnerable to giving up three-pointers. Doug McDermott and Creighton hit 30 on them in 2 games this season. We think Iowa State's going to hit enough threes, and we think they're going to pull an upset.
So that's our Sweet 16 and our Elite Eight. Check back later for our Final Four picks and our national champion.